Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Plitt, as I understand it, a great proportion of the aid which is provided by USAID is provided to the UN, which then furthers the support for various entities throughout the Middle East. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say a large portion is particularly on the humanitarian assistance front, where we have a strong partner in the World Food Program.
Why do we not provide that directly as opposed to using the UN? And the reason I say that is because obviously there are other forces in the UN that are not necessarily aligned with our interests. And providing funding to the UN to provide humanitarian resources suggests the opportunity for that to be not necessarily diverted, but perhaps not as carefully watched and as carefully attributed to the United States. If we send money to the UN and then out goes, UN packaging that says, here, this is given to you by the UN, it's like, wait, why don't we just send it directly from ourselves? Why do we use the UN as the vehicle for providing humanitarian aid in the Middle East?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I believe the principal reason why we do channel much of our humanitarian assistance to the UN is because they are present on the ground in a lot of these places which are non-permissive, and they've had a long presence, and certainly in the case of the World Food Program, they have the most extensive reach in terms of ensuring the food security to the populations. Places like Yemen, 2/3 of the population is dependent on humanitarian aid. It is very difficult to work in that environment with the behavior of the Houthis, and the UN is present on the ground. We are cognizant of the need to brand our aid and ensure that the American people get credit for that aid. And so we do that as much as possible, both through the UN and through our international NGO partners that we have who work alongside the UN in these difficult environments.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, for instance, in Gaza, the chairman read a statement indicating from USAID that, hey, there haven't been resources diverted to go to Hamas. At the same time, the people of Gaza support Hamas, voted for Hamas. It's their government, if you will, and that's been their choice to have Hamas. If the UN provides food to all the people in Gaza, that would include not just those that voted for Hamas, but also Hamas fighters. I mean, Hamas fighters are going to eat as well, and I'm sure the UN doesn't say, okay, here, you get in line here, but anyone from Hamas, you can't eat. I mean, so it doesn't have to have diversion for there to be, if you will, USAID through UN providing food and other assistance, medicines and so forth to members of Hamas. Is that right?
I think I would respond to that by advising that there are 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza who are desperate. I would reemphasize Special Envoy Setterfield's is that we don't have any indication that our aid through the UN has been diverted. I mean, I don't think we can make any guarantees with 2.2 million people that a member of Hamas doesn't get a sandwich here and there, but the desperation that exists, the food security situation that exists, requires that we work with vetted partners and those on the ground to ensure that the needs of desperate civilians are met.
Ms. O'Donnell, same sort of concern that I'd raised with history at UNESCO. It's obviously been seen as being anti-Semitic in the past. And we have withdrawn from UNESCO. President Biden reestablished relations with UNESCO. You said that you would combat the anti-Semitism that has been consistently part of UNESCO's history. How do you combat that? Isn't the best way to combat it to basically say we're not going to participate, we're not going to provide funding to UNESCO, we're not going to be supportive of an anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli oriented organization?
Thank you for the question, Senator Romney. And I fully believe, like our president, that multilateral institute, you just referenced some of the flaws and concerns with the UN system. I sit here today eyes wide open to those flaws, and I think it's even more important that we have our seat at the table to represent not just the interests of the US, but those of our allies and partners. And I do think we know what happens when the US leaves the stage, and it's incredibly critical that we be there. And I think, how do we do that? We do that by partnering with the like-minded member states who are part of the UNESCO and being a part of coalition building to bring others on to this case. And I think I will bring, if confirmed to this role, my experience having worked on the first ever national strategy to combat anti-Semitism that we rolled out as part of the administration with Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff. And I will bring a conviction to ensure that anti-Israel bias in all of its forms is warded against.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.